the seventh child of Blackridge when I was 11 years old. 6 children disappeared from my hometown. For almost 30 years, I told myself there was a reason I survived. Maybe I'd been lucky. Maybe the thing that came for us had been killed. Maybe the adults had finally buried it deep enough that it could never come back. I believed all 3 of those things. I was wrong about all 3. The summer it happened, Blackridge, West Virginia, had fewer than 900 people, 1 gas station, 2 churches, an elementary school built in 1958, and a coal mine that had been closed longer than I had been alive. People still called it a mining town. That was mostly nostalgia. The mine had stopped producing coal years before. Half the old workers had moved away. Houses sat empty along roads, where weeds pushed through cracked pavement. But the mine was still there, or at least its entrances were. Everyone in Blackridge knew there were tunnels beneath us. Nobody knew how many. My grandmother used to say, the old company maps were lies. At 11, I thought that was just something old people said. That summer, my parents sent me to stay with her while they tried to sort out what they called money problems. I knew enough to understand that meant they were fighting. I knew enough not to ask when I was going home. My grandmother's name was Evelyn Mercer. She lived in the same white farmhouse where my mother had grown up, 3 miles outside town. There was a barn behind the house, although she hadn't kept livestock in years. The land beyond it rolled down toward a creek, then climbed into thick wooded hills. At night, there were no streetlights, no traffic, no city glow, just darkness. Real darkness. The kind that makes every window look like a black mirror. My Uncle Daniel lived about a mile away. He wasn't actually my uncle by blood. He was my mother's younger half-brother, but nobody in our family bothered with technical definitions. He was 34, worked on tractors and logging equipment, and had the kind of hands that looked permanently stained with grease. Daniel treated me like a younger brother, which meant he insulted me constantly and let me do things my grandmother would have forbidden. The first week I was there, he taught me how to drive his old pickup in a field. The second week, he let me fire a .22 at empty cans. Grandma nearly killed both of us when she found out. The only kid my age who lived nearby was Maggie Cole. Maggie was 12. She had red hair, too many freckles, and absolutely no sense of when to stop talking. Her parents owned a cattle farm down the road. She knew every abandoned building, culvert, creek crossing, and shortcut in Blackridge. She also knew every local ghost story. Most were stupid. A woman who walked Route 14 without a face. A miner who knocked on windows whenever someone was going to die. A church bell that rang underground. Then there were the mudwalkers. Maggie told me about them on my 4th day in Blackridge. We were sitting on an old concrete drainage pipe behind her father's pasture. You ever hear scratching under the floor? She asked. No. If you do, don't look. Why? Because they know when you look. I laughed. She didn't. What are they? Mudwalkers. That is the dumbest name I've ever heard. That's not the real name. What's the real name? She shrugged. Old people call them the below. I laughed harder. Maggie shoved me off the pipe. I landed in grass and nearly rolled into the drainage ditch. She grinned down at me. Keep laughing, city boy. I wasn't from a city. My parents lived in Charleston. But to Maggie, anything larger than Blackridge was New York. The mudwalkers, according to her, lived in old mine tunnels. They only came out after heavy rain. They crawled through mud faster than dogs. And if you heard them scratching beneath your house, you were supposed to turn off every light and stay away from the windows. Who told you that? My granddad. And he saw one. He said his brother did. Convenient. You'll believe me when one eats you. That was the end of the conversation. At least I thought it was. 3 nights later, the rain started. It had been hot all week. Heavy, wet heat that made your clothes stick to your back before noon. Then a storm came over the hills so quickly, the sky seemed to turn black in minutes. Grandma stood on the porch watching it. Daniel had stopped by after work and was helping move some tools into the barn. I remember Grandma saying, "That's too much water too fast." Daniel looked at the clouds. We needed rain. Not like this. He smiled. Mom, it's rain. She didn't answer. That bothered me. My grandmother had an opinion about everything. The rain continued all night. By morning, the creek had doubled in size. Branches were scattered across the yard. The dirt road outside Grandma's house had become brown soup. At 7:30, somebody started pounding on the front door. Not knocking, pounding. Grandma opened it. A man I recognized from Maggie's church stood there soaked from the knees down. His name was Tom Foster. His face looked wrong. Not sad, not frightened. Empty. Caleb's gone. Grandma froze. What? He's gone. Caleb Foster was 8 years old. He had been playing video games in the living room before the power went out. His mother went into the kitchen to make breakfast. When she came back, the back door was open. Caleb was gone. At first, everyone assumed he had gone outside. Maybe to look at the flooding, Maybe to find their dog. 20 minutes passed, then 40, then an hour. By 9 in the morning, half of Blackridge was looking for him. Daniel told me to stay with Grandma. I didn't. I waited until she was on the phone, climbed out the bathroom window, and cut across the pasture toward the Foster property. Maggie was already there. You too, she said. You're not supposed to be here either. My mom thinks I'm at my aunt's. We followed a group of volunteers along the tree line. Sheriff Ray Coleman had arrived. Ray was a broad man with gray in his beard and a voice that could carry across a football field. He organized groups and sent people in different directions. Someone found Caleb's baseball cap near a fence. Then, 30 minutes later, they found his shoe. I still remember that shoe. Blue and gray. One Velcro strap torn loose. Covered in thick brown mud. It sat about 3 feet from the edge of a sinkhole. The hole hadn't been there the week before. I knew that because Maggie and I had crossed that same field. Now there was a depression roughly 15 feet wide. The center had collapsed into darkness. Roots hung from the sides. Water ran down into it. Ray pushed everyone back. Stay away from the edge. Daniel saw me. His face tightened. Noah. I pretended not to hear him. He grabbed the back of my shirt. What did your grandmother tell you? To stay home. And I didn't. Fantastic. Family Genius continues. He started dragging me away. That's when I saw the hair. At first I thought it was part of a root, a clump of black fibers stuck to a broken branch near the rim of the sinkhole. I pulled free of Daniel and picked it up. It was coarse, greasy, too long to be dog hair. What's this? Daniel took it from me. His expression changed, not fear, confusion. Sheriff Coleman walked over. Put that down. Daniel handed it to him. Ray looked at the fibers. Could be bear. There aren't black bears living under cattle fields, Maggie said. Ray looked at her. Maggie, why are you here? She immediately walked away. Ray gave the hair to a deputy. Then he ordered us both removed from the search area. Grandma was waiting when Daniel brought me home. I had never seen her that angry. She didn't yell. That would have been easier. She stared at me for about 10 seconds. Then she asked one question. Did you touch anything? No. That was a lie. I'd touched the edge of the sinkhole. There had been a slick patch on one of the rocks. Clear, almost like mucus. I'd rubbed it between my fingers before wiping it on my jeans. I didn't tell her. Grandma stepped closer. Noah, think. I didn't touch anything. She looked at my shoes, then my hands, then out the window toward the rain. Daniel sighed. They're bringing in county rescue. Grandma asked. Did they find a tunnel? Daniel looked surprised. How do you know? Her face lost color. They dropped a light, maybe 30 feet, he said. There's some kind of opening down there. Mine shaft. Doesn't match any map Ray has. Grandma sat down. Daniel noticed. Mom, she didn't answer. That night, she locked every door before sunset. She checked the windows twice. Then she moved a kitchen chair beneath the back doorknob. I watched her. You think somebody took Caleb? No. Then why are you doing that? Because I said so. That was not an answer. Grandma hated non-answers, which meant she was scared. Around midnight, I woke up. For a few seconds, I didn't know why. The house was completely silent. Then I heard it scratch. I sat up. Scratch. Scratch. The sound was soft, slow, like fingernails dragging across wood. I looked toward the window. Nothing. Another scratch. This time, I realized it wasn't coming from outside. It was beneath me, under the floor. I held my breath. Scratch. 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 I remembered Maggie. If you hear scratching under the floor, don't look. I nearly laughed. Then something moved beneath the house. Fast. Not a rat. Not a raccoon. It ran from underneath my room toward the kitchen, in 3 or 4 heavy impacts. Thump, 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 then silence. I stayed awake until sunrise. Caleb was not found the next day, or the day after that. On the 3rd day, another child disappeared. Her name was Sarah Wynn, 9 years old. She lived on the west side of town. Her father had left her in the backyard while he went inside to answer a phone call. He was gone less than 5 minutes. When he came back, the yard was empty. There were no footprints leading toward the street. No damaged fence. No sign of a vehicle. But under the fence, near the vegetable garden, police found a trench of freshly disturbed soil, like something had tunneled beneath it. Blackridge changed after Sarah disappeared. Adults stopped letting kids walk anywhere alone. Church groups organized searches. People who had not spoken to one another in years suddenly stood together in fields calling the names of missing children. Sheriff Coleman announced a voluntary dusk curfew for anyone under 16. Then Walter Briggs came to Grandma's house. I had seen Walter around town. Everyone had. He drove an ancient brown Ford and walked with a metal cane. His left leg bent slightly inward from an accident in the mine. People said he drank too much. They also said never to ask him about the collapse that ended his mining career. He arrived just before dinner. Grandma opened the door. The second she saw him, she whispered, "No." Walter said, "You saw the hair?" "No." "Evelyn." I said no. Daniel stepped into the hallway. "What is this?" Walter looked at him, then at me. "Boy needs to leave the room." That guaranteed I was not leaving the room. Grandma pointed upstairs. "Noah." I went upstairs, then climbed halfway down the back stairs and listened through the wall. Walter placed something on the kitchen table. I couldn't see it clearly from where I hid. It looked like a strip of black leather. Daniel asked, "What the hell is that?" Walter said, "Something I cut off one of them in '96. Silence. Daniel laughed once. Not because it was funny, because the alternative was believing him. "One of what?" Walter answered. "The below." That was the first time I heard an adult use Maggie's name for them. Daniel said, "You're serious." "I was serious 30 years ago too," Grandma whispered. "We buried it." "No. We buried a tunnel. You told us they were dead." I was wrong. Daniel asked what they were talking about. Walter told him. In the summer of 1996, 6 children disappeared in Blackridge. Not in accidents, not runaways, not kidnappings. They vanished near collapsed mine entrances after weeks of heavy rain. The adults searched. Then miners began finding tunnels that did not belong to the mine. Natural caves connected to man-made shafts. Walter and 3 other men went down. Only 2 came back. They found animals living below Blackridge. Walter didn't know what kind. He said they were roughly human-sized, but moved mostly on 4 limbs, long forearms, powerful hind legs, black hair, yellow eyes. They could squeeze through spaces that looked impossibly narrow, and they knew the tunnels better than any miner. One attacked Walter. He shot it. It escaped. He tore a strip of hide from its shoulder on a broken steel support. The men used mining explosives to collapse the largest passage. The disappearances stopped. Then the mine company got involved. Then the county. Nobody wanted a state investigating unsafe tunnels. Nobody wanted newspapers. Nobody wanted the mine permanently condemned while hundreds of families still depended on work. So they changed the story. Officially, the children were victims of flooding, abandoned shafts, and possible wildlife. No bodies were recovered. No animal was ever mentioned. Daniel said nothing for a while. Then he asked Grandma, "You knew this?" "Yes." "You knew all of it?" "Yes. And never told us." Grandma's voice cracked. We thought it was over. Walter said, "That's what people say when they're too scared to admit they don't know." Then he said something that made me forget to breathe. There was a 7th child. Daniel asked, "What?" Walter replied, 6 disappeared. Then they came for 1 more. I heard Grandma's chair scrape. Walter continued, "She lived." Daniel whispered, "Mom." Grandma did not answer. Walter said, "Your mother was 11. My age." I leaned against the wall. Suddenly my grandmother's locked windows made sense. Her questions about whether I had touched anything made sense. Her face at Caleb's sinkhole made sense. That night, I confronted her. She didn't deny it. "I was playing near an old drainage cut," she told me. "Something followed me home." "What?" "I don't know." "You saw it?" "Parts of it." "What parts?" She looked at the window. "Enough. Why didn't you tell Mom?" "What would I tell her? That monsters live under the ground? Are they monsters?" She looked at me. "I don't know what they are." That answer scared me more than if she had said yes. 4 days after Sarah disappeared, Daniel saw one. He had joined a search team checking old mine entrances near Hollow Creek. The search continued past dark. Around 10:30, Daniel heard a child crying. He told me later that it sounded exactly like Caleb. Not similar. Exactly. "Help me." Daniel followed the voice. "Help me." The sound came from behind an old concrete ventilation structure. He rounded the corner. At first he thought someone was crouched in the mud. Then it turned its head. Daniel stopped talking when he reached this part. I asked, "What did it look like?" He rubbed both hands over his face. "Wrong. What does that mean? You ever see an animal, and your brain knows what it is, before you even think?" I nodded. This was the opposite. The creature stood about 4 feet high on all 4s. Its arms were longer than its legs. Its body was narrow, but muscular. Wet black hair hung from its back in ropes. Its neck was too long. Its face was almost flat, except for 2 openings, where a nose should have been, and its eyes reflected yellow in Daniel's flashlight. It looked directly at him. Then, in Caleb's voice, it said, "Help me." Daniel ran. The creature followed. He heard it behind him, not crashing through brush like a deer, moving low, fast, almost silent, except for splashing mud. Daniel reached the paved county road. When he looked back, the thing had stopped at the tree line. It watched him, then dropped flat against the mud, and vanished. After that, nobody in our family argued with Walter. Sheriff Coleman did, at least at first. Ray listened to Daniel's story with his jaw tight. Then he said, "You were tired." Daniel stared at him. "I know what I saw." "You saw something." "It spoke. Animals can mimic sounds." "What animal?" Ray didn't answer. That's when Walter said, "Ask your father." Ray looked at him. "My father's dead." "I know. What about him?" Walter tapped his cane against the floor. "Ask yourself why he never let you play near the old mine." Ray's expression changed. Ray Coleman's father had been sheriff in 1996. He had signed the reports. He had helped bury the story. By the end of that week, 4 children were missing. Then 5. Then 6. I remember the number because after the 6th disappearance, Walter came to our house and stared at me for a long time. Grandma noticed. "Don't." Walter said nothing. "What?" I asked. "Nothing." "What?" Grandma stepped between us. "Walter." He looked away. 30 years ago, 6 children had disappeared. Then something came for my grandmother. Now, 6 children were gone again. I didn't need Walter to explain the pattern. That night, I slept with the lamp on. At 2:13 in the morning, I woke up because someone was standing outside my window. My room was on the first floor. For one confused second, I thought it was Daniel. Then lightning flashed. The figure dropped to all 4s. I couldn't move. It was maybe 15 feet from the glass. Thin, black, covered in rain. Its shoulders were strangely high, its head hanging lower than them. The yellow eyes were unmistakable. It crawled forward. Slowly, one hand touched the ground, then the other. The fingers were long, too long. I pulled the blanket to my chin like that could protect me. The thing reached the window. It did not hit the glass. It did not growl. It simply stared. Its breath fogged the lower pane. Then it leaned close. I saw pieces of its face. Wet hair, dark skin beneath. A mouth that opened wider than I expected. Small, pale teeth. The creature lifted one hand, touched the window, then turned away. It crossed the yard and disappeared behind the barn. I screamed for Grandma. Daniel arrived 15 minutes later. Walter came 20 minutes after that. Outside my window, they found 3 deep impressions in the mud, and a clear, oily substance smeared across the wood siding. Walter smelled it. His face went white. Grandma asked, "What?" Walter stood. "I saw this before." "Where?" 30 years ago. I whispered, "What is it?" He looked at me. "It's how they mark you." Grandma immediately started packing. She threw clothes into a duffel bag. "We're leaving," Daniel said. "Roads washed out south, then north. Bridges closed. We'll walk." Walter shook his head. "Won't matter." Grandma turned on him. "Don't tell me that. They're moving through the ground, Evelyn. You don't know that?" "Yes, I do." Grandma's voice broke. "I am not losing him." Walter looked at her. "I know." That morning, Dr. Helen Ward arrived in Blackridge. The county had brought her in because the sinkholes were spreading. Helen was an environmental engineer, specializing in mine subsidence. She was 44, blunt, exhausted, and completely uninterested in local legends. Sheriff Coleman showed her the collapsed road, then the Foster sinkhole, then the material outside my window. Helen took samples. Walter told her what he believed. She listened politely, then said, "I'm not diagnosing a cryptid." Walter replied, "Call it whatever lets you sleep." Helen spent most of the day mapping subsurface anomalies. She compared mining records with new ground-penetrating radar readings. By evening, she looked worried. "There are voids underneath the southern half of town," she told Ray. "Mine tunnels? Some, not all. What are the others?" "Natural caverns, maybe." "How big?" Helen hesitated. "Bigger than the mine." That shut everyone up. Then she showed us something else. The substance from outside my window contained proteins, salts, fatty compounds, and volatile chemicals she couldn't immediately identify. "Animal secretion?" Daniel asked. "Most likely." Walter said, "It's a mark." Helen frowned. "Maybe." Grandma looked at her. "Maybe." Helen pointed at the sample. Many species use scent for territory, reproduction, communication, prey tracking. This could be chemical marking. I felt sick. "Prey." Helen looked at me, apparently realizing she'd said the word in front of an 11-year-old. I said could. Walter looked at Grandma. Same thing. But Helen wasn't finished. She asked for my clothes from the day Caleb disappeared. I had worn the jeans twice since then. Grandma found them in the laundry room. Helen sealed them in a plastic bag. The next morning, she came back. "There are traces of the same compound on these." Grandma looked confused. "The creature was outside 2 nights ago." Helen shook her head. The residue on the jeans is older. Everybody looked at me. I remembered the sinkhole, the slick rock, my fingers, wiping them on my pants. I admitted everything. Grandma sat down. Daniel swore. Walter closed his eyes. Helen asked exactly where I had touched it. I showed her on a map. She stared at the location, then said, "You weren't marked at your house." "No, you carried it home." That changed everything. For 30 years, Blackridge believed there had been something special about my grandmother. 6 children disappeared. Then Evelyn was chosen as the 7th. It happened again with me. 6 children disappeared. Then something came to my window. People had built a legend around the number, the 7th child. A pattern, a rule. But what if the pattern was wrong? Helen began plotting every disappearance on a map. 6 red circles. She added the known sinkholes, then abandoned mine portals. Maggie, who had somehow managed to join us, despite being specifically banned from the sheriff's office, leaned over the table. "Those aren't random." Helen looked at her. "What?" Maggie pointed. "My dad uses that road." She moved her finger from one disappearance to another. "There's an old mine entrance here, then another, and here." Walter stepped closer. His expression changed. Helen added historical mine survey overlays. 7 branches spread through the hills beneath Blackridge. 7 major access zones. The disappearances clustered around 6 of them. My grandmother's house sat above the 7th. Walter whispered, "Jesus." Helen looked at him. "What?" "We thought they were picking children. They were hunting territories," she said. There was no ritual, no supernatural number, no mysterious need for a 7th child. There were 7 tunnel systems, 7 feeding areas. My grandmother had been attacked because she'd touched their scent 30 years earlier. I had done the same thing. Walter looked almost disappointed, not because he wanted the legend to be true, because he had spent 30 years being afraid of the wrong thing. Helen said, "Predators don't need legends." That sentence stayed with me. 2 days later, we saw what was under Blackridge. Helen lowered a reinforced camera into the largest sinkhole. The feed ran to a monitor inside a county truck. At first we saw rock, water, broken timber. Then the shaft widened. The camera descended almost 200 feet. The tunnel opened into a natural cavern. Something moved at the edge of the light. Helen stopped the winch. The camera adjusted. A pair of yellow eyes appeared. Then another. Then 5. Then 10. Shapes moved across the cave floor. Small ones. Larger ones. Some climbed the walls. Nobody spoke. Then something enormous crossed the back of the cavern. Walter grabbed the monitor. "Stop." Helen froze the frame. The image was blurred, but the creature was far larger than the others. Its black hair had gray patches. 3 pale scars crossed its back. Walter whispered, "That's him." Daniel asked, "Who?" "The one I shot. In 1996. Walter nodded. "He lived." The screen suddenly shook. A face filled the camera. Yellow eyes, a dark mouth, then static. The cable went slack. Helen whispered, "How many were down there?" Nobody answered. That afternoon, Sheriff Coleman ordered a voluntary evacuation. It became mandatory 2 hours later, when another sinkhole swallowed half a garage. But Blackridge had one serious problem. There were only 2 reliable roads out. The southern route had already collapsed. At 6:30 that evening, the northern bridge failed. Not completely, but enough that vehicles couldn't cross. Then the rain returned. Harder than before. Blackridge was trapped. Ray made the decision to move everyone still in town to Blackridge Elementary. The school sat on higher ground. 2 floors. Concrete walls. Emergency generator. Heavy doors. It sounded safe. Walter hated the idea. Too many people in one place. Ray said, "That's the point. Not if they can get underneath." Helen checked the old maps. "The school is above reinforced mine workings." Walter looked at her. "Maps told you there was nothing under Foster's Field. Nobody had a better option." By 9 that night, more than 80 people were inside the school. Children on the 2nd floor. Adults below. Windows locked. Doors barricaded. Daniel carried a shotgun. Ray and 2 deputies had rifles. Walter had an old hunting rifle with a worn wooden stock. Grandma stayed beside me. Maggie sat across the classroom with her parents. She looked terrified. I had never seen Maggie terrified. That frightened me more than anything. At 11:47, the generator stopped. The building went dark. Someone screamed. Flashlights came on. Helen went downstairs with a maintenance worker. Then we heard scratching. One scrape. Then another. Across the outside wall. Everyone stopped talking. Scratch. 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 It moved from one side of the building to the other. Then another sound joined it. Then another. Then dozens. Daniel went to a 2nd floor window. He aimed his flashlight at the yard. Nothing. He moved the beam toward the fence. 2 yellow dots reflected. Then 4, 6, 10, 20. Maggie's mother began praying. Walter whispered, "Don't count." I knew what he meant. There were too many. A shape ran across the parking lot. Then another. One hit the side of the building with a dull thump. Someone downstairs shouted. Glass broke. Daniel ran for the door. Grandma grabbed my shoulders. "Stay here." I did. For about 30 seconds. Then Maggie and I followed. The first floor hallway smelled like wet dirt. One of the side windows had shattered. The metal security bars were twisted outward, not bent, pulled from the concrete. A black arm reached through. A deputy fired. The arm vanished. Something screamed outside. Not an animal scream. Not human either. A high, broken sound that seemed to come from several throats at once. Then the floor vibrated. Walter's face changed. "Upstairs," Ray shouted. "Everybody upstairs." A crack appeared across the tile near the lobby. Then another. The ground beneath it lifted. Concrete buckled. People ran. A section of floor collapsed. A man standing beside it vanished. His scream lasted less than 2 seconds. I saw fingers grab the broken edge. Then something pulled him down. Daniel grabbed me. "What are you doing here?" Before I could answer, the wall behind us shook. He lifted me and ran. We reached the second floor. Then the scratching began on the windows. They were climbing, or trying to. Black shapes appeared against the glass. Hands slapped the windows. Yellow eyes flashed. The school was no shelter. It was a box, and we were inside it. Helen pushed through the crowd. "They're tracking Noah." Grandma stared at her. "What?" "The compound." Helen pointed at me. "They keep concentrating on this side of the building because he's here. So wash it off." We did. "Then why?" Helen looked at my grandmother. "Maybe some of it bonded to clothing, shoes, skin oils. I don't know," I said. "If they follow the smell, can we make them follow something else?" Helen looked at me. "What?" "Give them more." Everyone went quiet. I explained badly. Helen understood anyway. The county truck still contained sealed samples from the sinkholes, including concentrated secretion collected from several sites. The school maintenance room had diesel, cleaning chemicals, rain gear, old uniforms. Helen said, "If we could create a stronger trail." Daniel immediately said, "No." Ray asked, "Trail, to where?" Walter answered, "South ventilation cut." Helen looked at him. "Why?" "It connects to the old collapse zone, the one from 1996. Walter nodded. "The ground there is unstable. We get enough of them inside. Maybe we close it." "With what?" Walter looked out the window. "The county left an excavator by the inspection pit." Daniel understood. "So we lure them away from the school." Helen looked at me. "Yes," Grandma said. "Noah isn't going anywhere. He doesn't need to." That became the plan. Helen and Ray made the scent mixture. They soaked old coveralls in rags. Daniel and 2 deputies took them through a rear maintenance exit. The storm covered their movement. They dragged the scent trail across the field, toward the abandoned ventilation road. At first, nothing happened. Then the scratching stopped. One by one, the yellow eyes moved away from the school. Maggie whispered, "It's working." For 1 minute, I believed her. Then something hit the front entrance. The entire building shook. Once. Twice. Walter looked toward the sound. No. Third impact. Meadow screamed. Ray raised his rifle. "What?" Walter whispered. "The old one." The doors burst inward. It entered the lobby, standing almost upright. Old Hollow. That was the name Walter gave it later. At the time, nobody called it anything. It was too large to need a name. Almost 7 feet when it lifted itself. Long arms, thick shoulders, gray mixed through black wet hair. Scars crossed its chest and back. Its yellow eyes moved across every adult in the hallway, then stopped on me. Not Helen, not Ray, not Daniel. Me. Helen whispered, "It knows." The smaller creatures followed the chemical trail. Old Hollow didn't. It had seen me, smelled me from feet away. Maybe remembered me. Maybe remembered my grandmother. It charged. Ray fired. The first shot struck its shoulder. Green-black fluid sprayed the wall. It barely slowed. Daniel fired next. Old Hollow slammed into him. Daniel flew backward into lockers. Grandma screamed. I ran. I didn't decide to. I wasn't brave. There was no heroic thought. My body ran before my mind caught up. Down the hallway, through the kitchen, out a rear door, into the rain. I heard Old Hollow behind me. That is the part people misunderstand when I tell this story. They imagine an 11-year-old making a plan. I had no plan. I was terrified. I slipped twice in the mud. I lost one shoe. I didn't stop. The creature followed. I ran away from the school, toward the old ventilation road, exactly where Walter wanted the others to go. I didn't realize that until I saw the excavator. The machine sat beside a new sinkhole, its boom raised over the mud. Daniel's truck was nearby. Walter emerged from behind it. Noah. I ran toward him. Old Hollow came out of the rain behind me. Walter fired. The shot hit its face. It twisted. I reached Walter. He grabbed my jacket and threw me behind the excavator. Then Daniel arrived. Blood ran from his forehead. He climbed into the machine. Get away from the cut. Walter knew what he was trying to do. The old tunnel entrance sat beneath a wall of saturated earth. 30 years earlier, explosives had collapsed part of it. Now rain had softened everything. Daniel lowered the excavator bucket. He struck the retaining wall. Once. Mud fell. Again. A crack opened. Old Hollow rushed toward us. Walter fired his last shot. Missed. The creature hit him. They went down together. I screamed. Daniel struck the wall a third time. The hillside shifted. Walter looked at the falling earth. Then at Daniel. Do it. Daniel froze. Old Hollow grabbed Walter by the leg. Do it. Daniel pulled the controls. The bucket tore through the weakened support. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then the hill collapsed. The sound was deeper than thunder. Mud, rock, broken concrete, trees, everything slid into the cut. Walter disappeared. Old Hollow disappeared with him. The ground beneath me moved. Daniel jumped from the excavator and grabbed me. We ran. The sinkhole expanded behind us. Then the entire entrance collapsed. The smaller mudwalkers began screaming from inside the tunnel. Some fled into the woods. Others vanished into holes. Then, one by one, the yellow eyes disappeared. By dawn, the rain stopped. State police reached Blackridge after emergency crews stabilized the northern bridge. The school was evacuated. 3 adults were dead. 2 more were missing. 6 children were still missing. Walter Briggs was never recovered. Neither was Old Hollow. The official report described the event as a combination of severe mine subsidence, structural failure, flash flooding, and attacks by unidentified wildlife. That phrase appeared repeatedly. Unidentified wildlife. The county sealed every accessible mine entrance with concrete. State geologists came. Federal inspectors came. People in unmarked vehicles came. Helen Ward gave statements for weeks. Sheriff Coleman did too. Then the story disappeared. Blackridge Elementary never reopened. My family moved before winter. Grandma sold the farmhouse 2 years later. Nobody bought it. She died when I was 26. Near the end, when she was in the hospital, I asked her one final question. Do you think Walter killed it? Grandma looked at me for a long time. Then said, I think Walter buried it. That isn't what I asked. I know. I became a geotechnical engineer. People assume I chose the profession because of Blackridge. They're right. I spent my adult life studying things under the ground. Mines, sinkholes, karst systems, subterranean ecosystems, animals living without sunlight, species adapted to caves. I wanted a scientific name for what happened. I never found one. No known mammal matches the anatomy I saw. No known predator uses the exact secretion Helen documented. Helen eventually retired. Ray Coleman died 6 years ago. Daniel is still alive. He refuses to talk about that night. Maggie moved to Ohio. We exchanged Christmas messages. Never about Blackridge. For almost 3 decades, I convinced myself it had been isolated. An unknown species trapped beneath one old mining town. Maybe the colony died after we closed the tunnels. Maybe Old Hollow was the last breeding adult. Maybe Walter's sacrifice ended it. Then, last October, I received an email. It came from an engineer named Eric Dalton in western Pennsylvania. He had found one of my papers about abandoned mine subsidence and wanted my opinion. A small town near an old coal field had experienced several sinkholes after unusually heavy rain. One of them opened behind a farmhouse. An 8-year-old boy was missing. Search crews found one shoe beside the collapse. Eric attached photographs. The first showed the sinkhole. The second showed damaged fencing. The third showed the shoe. I almost stopped there. Then I opened the fourth. Black fibers clung to a broken root. Long, coarse, wet. My hands started shaking. There was one final image. A close-up of the rock inside the sinkhole. Across its surface was a thin smear of clear, oily residue. Even through a photograph, I remembered the smell. Metal, wet soil. Something sour beneath it. The same smell that had been on my jeans when I was 11. The same smell outside my grandmother's window. I called Eric. He answered on the second ring. I asked whether anyone had touched the substance. He said yes. A search volunteer. Then he told me something else. The volunteer's daughter was 12. That night, the family heard scratching underneath their house. I told Eric to get them out immediately. He laughed nervously, then asked me why. For several seconds, I couldn't answer, because I knew how insane the truth sounded. I had spent nearly 30 years trying to prove Blackridge had been explainable. A hidden predator, a lost species, an isolated colony, something natural, something contained. But staring at those photographs, I understood the mistake. The people of Blackridge had made it in 1996. We made it again when I was 11. We thought the mine was their home. It wasn't. The mine was simply a door. One of many. For 30 years, I believed we had buried them beneath Blackridge. I was wrong. We hadn't buried them. We had only buried one entrance. And somewhere beneath Pennsylvania, something had just found another end.